All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Atlantic County Bikeway West Public Workshop number 1. Thank you for joining us. Before we get started, I just wanted to go over some Zoom-related housekeeping measures. So as this is a public workshop, sorry, there we are. So as this is a public workshop, we will be looking to you all to provide input and feedback throughout the course of this presentation, and we'll be doing that by using Zoom's polling features. What does that mean is that when a poll is activated, it will automatically pop up on your screen and you could begin responding. Your responses will remain anonymous and we'll be sure to provide everyone with enough time to respond to both the polls before proceeding. Additionally, if you have a question during the presentation, the Q&A feature, which can be used, which is located at the bottom of your screen, can be used. Type in your response. And if you would like to type in a question or a response to one of our questions, you could do so there as well. And if it does pertain to a certain topic area, feel free to indicate that relevant topic. When the time comes, we will then read it aloud and respond to your question. We do respectfully ask that if you would like to use either that question box, please be respectful, of course, as we would only be responding and saying your questions out loud for those that are relevant to the topic and of this project, of course. If you would like to elaborate on a question or one of your poll responses, you may raise your hand. And by doing that, you'll then be able to unmute yourself and ask your question or further provide your feedback aloud. And when doing that, we do request that you keep your feedback to approximately 2 minutes. Again, just to be respectful of other people's times and so that we can move throughout this workshop in an efficient manner. Lastly, I do want to note that at the end of this presentation, there will be an opportunity for further question and answer. So with that, I'll hand it over to Jenna from SJTPO.
Thank you, Christina. Good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining us. I'm Jenna Monahan. I'm an assistant planner at the South Jersey Transportation Planning Organization, and I serve as the project manager for this project on SJTPO's end. Just real quick, for those of you unfamiliar with SJTPO, we are the Metropolitan Planning Organization for Atlantic, Cape May, Cumberland, and Salem counties. We are a technical resource that provides access to funding and work to provide a regional approach to address transportation planning and engineering issues. This project is a continuation of work that we completed back in 2021 with Atlantic County and now today with our consultants WSP and VHB. I'm very excited that you are all here tonight to learn more and give feedback about this feasibility study and for the hopeful creation of a greater trail network in Atlantic County. And with that, I will pass it along to Hannah from Atlantic County.
Hi, good evening. I'm Hannah Genero, Atlantic County Assistant Planner, and I'm Atlantic County's project manager working on this project. Thank you for being here. I'm going to pass this along to WSP's Debbie Hartman, and she can get us started.
Thank you, Hannah. So good evening, everyone. Again, I also want to thank you for joining. Just to explain who the project team is, Jenna Monahan was just introduced herself as the project manager from SJTPO, and Hannah from Atlantic County. And then the consultant team consists of myself, Debbie Hartman, and I serve as the project manager for this phase of the study. And I'm joined by John Federico, also from WSP. And then we have a sub-consultant, BHB, who is going to be moderating and doing all the polling for this webinar. And that team includes Sharon Tepper, Christiana Kastelek, and Lizzie Allwater. So I want to talk a little bit about what our agenda is for tonight. I'm first going to walk us through the project background and kind of how we got to this point in the project and what has been building over the years. Do a project update of where we are now. Talk a little bit about some specific focus areas that we're going to kind of dive into some alignments and ask you guys what you think, and then talk about the next steps for this project and open up to any final discussion questions. Okay, so to talk a little bit about how we got to this project point, we began a feasibility study, WSP, back in 2020 and 2021. And the goal of that was to connect Philadelphia to Cape May via a continuous off-road multi-use trail network for all ages and abilities. So that original initial feasibility study was this whole area that you see in the red box. So we were looking a way to connect the two bikeways, the one on the east, which is the existing Atlantic County Bikeway, and that is this lighter blue line to the planned darker blue Camden County link that you see on the west side. So we're looking for a way to connect from point A to point B, and that's what we were calling the proposed Atlantic County Bikeway West project. I'm going to let Christiana take over and start us off with an icebreaker poll.
So before we dive into what is being proposed as part of this project, we want to understand how you currently engage with the existing bikeways that Debbie just talked through and other trails in the area. So we are going to get started with our first poll of the evening. And again, the polls are going to automatically pop up on your screen. Once it does, feel free to start responding. Then please click submit so then we receive your answers. And with that, let me pull up the first poll. All right, you should have the first poll open in front of you. And the first question, so there is a set of 3 questions. The first that we have is, how do you generally get around on a daily basis? And for this, you could choose all that may apply to you, whether you drive yourself, you walk, you bike, whatever it may be. So again, choose all of the responses that do apply to you. From there, the second question is, have you used the existing Atlantic County Bikeway or Pleasantville to the Summers Point Trail before? And so this is a single choice question. We're looking to understand if you have used these trails before, one or the other, or maybe you haven't used these at all, or maybe you haven't even heard of them before. So that's what we're trying to understand in the second question. And after you've gone through the first and second, the last question that we have here reads, if you have used these bikeways or trails before, how have you used them? And by that, we mean, have you used it to commute to work or school, maybe to run errands, exercise or fitness? Maybe you haven't used them at all. So those are the 3 questions. Take your time. I know there are a few to respond to. And we'll give everyone a few more minutes. It looks like we do have 11 out of 25 respondents already, which is great. And so for the first question, just some of the feedback that we received is that most of the folks that have responded either drive themselves with walking, kind of running as like the second mode of transportation, we'll say, biking or getting rides from others. We're not really seeing that anyone at this point either uses transit or rideshare. So again, it looks like driving is the primary mode. In addition to driving, the second question that we had was, have you used the existing trails before? And 54% of the respondents indicated that yes, they have used both trails. So that's great to know. While then 31% have indicated that they haven't used either trail. So this is good information for the team to start really understanding. And actually tied at around 8%, folks have either used one trail or the other. So again, these are great results. And please feel free to continue responding if you haven't done so yet. And then just lastly, the question number 3 was asking, when you use those trails, if you did, or if you have in the past, how have you used them? For what reason? And it looks like 64% of our respondents indicated either for exercise or fitness, recreation related activities, tourism or visiting attractions, running errands. And then there are a few folks that indicate that they haven't used them. So we'll leave that open for another few seconds. Let folks respond if you haven't done so yet. And then Debbie, I'll hand it back over to you in a little bit. All right, it looks like we kind of studied out. So with that, Debbie, I'll hand it back to you.
Thank you, Christiana. Okay. So want to talk a little bit about the background of this project that I referenced earlier. This map is a kind of a zoomed in area of that red box I showed you on the previous map. So this was the study that we completed in 2021. It was considered an initial feasibility study. And what we did is we looked at 3 general alignments and tried to identify what concerns or issues they had, as well as what positive opportunities they had. So the first one that you see that kind of goes across the top and then comes back down to connect is the New Jersey 50 and the Atlantic City Expressway corridor. And that really had some concerns related to the lack of available right-of-way along the Atlantic City Expressway corridor, isolation from population centers. There weren't really places where people lived and worked along the way, and there's some difficult crossings of the 322 interchange. So that one kind of immediately fell out of contention. We couldn't really find any positive opportunities even really to discuss. So then we kind of looked at the next two connections that you see that again are connecting that light blue existing Atlantic County Bikeway to the east and the planned Camden County link to the west. So the first one I'll talk about here is this diagonal, which is US 322 and Weymouth Road. One of the positives about that is the pretty direct route being a diagonal, and there are many access points along the route. 322 is a pretty busy road. But some of the issues that we encountered with that was a limited right-of-way along 322, again, isolated from a lot of the population centers, and a concern for numerous conflict points between drivers and trail users at many driveways along this corridor. The third and final general alignment that we looked at was this New Jersey 54 that's coming north-south, and then the rail corridor, this abandoned rail corridor that runs mostly parallel to Route 40. Some of the positives for that were not only is there a wide right-of-way available alongside Route 54 so that it can be an off-road trail, there is also a high separation of traffic because this railroad alignment is an abandoned railroad alignment and is completely free of any vehicles. It does have some proximity to population centers in the Buna area and the Mays Landing area. So those were considered positives. Some of the concerns that were found is it is a less direct route because it is, a right angle instead of a diagonal. And there were fewer identified potential access points along particularly the rail portion of the corridor. And that's something that we'll continue to look at as the study continues. But that third option, the New Jersey 54 and the rail corridor, did become the preferred initially proposed alignment that came out of that feasibility study. And that's where this study is beginning, which is the advanced feasibility and moving into concept development. So this red alignment is what you see that connects, again, the planned Camden-County link to the existing Atlantic County Bikeway to the east. So we will run through a couple of different areas. There is Folsom Borough, Buena Vista Township in this corner here, and then finally Hamilton Township, along with a small portion in Camden County. So this dark line here represents the change between Camden County and Atlantic County. So there is a little portion of this that will be in Camden County as well. And the reason this was chosen as the preferred alternative, again, is because of that wide right-of-way that's alongside Route 54, that unused right-of-way for the railroad that parallels Route 40, which gives you that high separation from traffic. There are pedestrian and bike generators in these higher density areas, in the retail areas surrounding Mays Landing and Folsom and Buna. So within that alignment, we came up with 3 focus areas, and that's what you see outlined in the black dashed boxes. And you'll see numbers for 1, 2, and 3, and we'll talk about these in a lot more detail throughout the presentation. The way that the SJTPO and Atlantic County has prioritized these is we're first going to take a look at focus area 3, which is the easternmost portion that directly connects to the existing Atlantic County Bikeway. The next focus area we'll look at is focus area 1 over here to the west that connects through Camden County. And then the final priority area is this focus area 2, which is right in the center. And the total project length of this entire red line is approximately 22 miles. So when we were doing the initial feasibility study, we were trying to serve 3 types of users. These are kind of in no particular order, but I want to explain what these types of users are and how they might use an off-road trail. So the first one is a community and functional user, and that's somebody who lives nearby and uses the trail truly as a transportation link. They need it to run their errands, to get to work, to visit family. So those are distances of about 1 to 10 miles, and they are, again, those functional trips. The second category that this is serving is the regional recreational user. And those might be people that live outside the study area, anywhere that they can drive in, but they want to use that regional trail system to make those longer trips for recreation, for exercise, and or related to tourism in the area. They might have a backpack, they might have camping involved with it, but they're looking at biking 25 to 75 plus miles. They may want to do the whole corridor from Philadelphia to Cape May ultimately. And then the third category is that local recreational user, and that may be what we see most of here tonight at this meeting. Those are people that live within a short walk or drive of the proposed trail, and they might use it for exercise. They might use it to hang out with friends, meet up for a bike ride or a walk or recreation. So they might take their dog for a walk, something about, less than 2 miles of walking or less than 5 miles of biking, somewhere in those shorter trips for a more regular, maybe not necessarily daily, but a more regular use. So now I want to talk about where we are in the process. I just kind of explained how we got to now, and this is where our path is going forward. So this stage is going to move us from feasibility study to concept development. So our main purpose here is to develop a feasible trail alignment, and that considers things like physical restraints, things like topography, roadway crossings, and environmental areas, which are prevalent in South Jersey. We also want to make sure that the right-of-way is viable. We have to dig into ownership of each of the parcels and make sure the proper coordination takes place so that we're understanding exactly where this proposed trail might be running. We want to take a close look at safety and traffic at any crossings of a roadway or a driveway. And we want to consider security either at trailheads or along the route, and maintenance, because obviously there may need to be emergency access, but we want to choose materials that are easier for maintenance so that this trail can be enjoyed by many people. So what we're working through is, again, a pros and cons of some alignment sub-alternatives, and we'll look at a couple of choices here in the focus areas. This is really heavy on agency coordination at this stage. There are, not just Atlantic County, but also Camden County will need to be involved as well. This runs through 3 different municipalities. We need to coordinate with NJDOT because some of it is the right-of-way is along their alignment. There's going to be heavy coordination with the New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection, as well as the Pinelands Commission, who has a lot of regulatory land in this area. So the bottom little drawing that you see, that's concept development, that blue box, that's what we're trying to complete at this phase. And then after concept development is complete, which I'll show you on the next slide, but this study is going to go through 2027. Then once we get to a final alignment, the project, if it gets accepted, will move into preliminary engineering, and that has its own schedule. And then upon completion of preliminary engineering, we move into final design and then later construction once funding dollars are secured. So we're in the very early stages of this project. And the schedule for this phase, this concept development phase that was in that light blue boxes, started back in November 2025, and we've done a lot of data collection in the time frame now of environmental data, right-of-way data, what structures may be along our proposed route. We're here right now with this first public meeting, so you'll see the public engagement starts now and continues through the entire length of the study. After tonight's meeting, we're going to move into some of the details of planning of this alignment. So things like security and maintenance, and ultimately over the course of the next 6 or 7 months, work towards coming up with that concept plan for the off-road trail. In the middle of that, we're going to have another event for the public, and it'll be a pop-up event where we'll go out somewhere, like maybe somewhere along a trail, somewhere where we can kind of encounter people out and about on their own terms. And then after the fall this year, once we have a firm alignment in place, we'll talk about what possible phasing could look like. It's 22 miles. It probably all can't be built at once. So what pieces make sense to possibly advance first, and what's the cost involved with that sliced and diced implementation plan. And then we'll have another meeting in the fall with the public. Everybody here will be invited as well to talk about the final plan and the phasing and costs. And that will be, again, winter of 2027. So approximately a year or so from now will be the conclusion of this concept development phase. Okay. So now I'm going to move into each of the individual focus areas one by one. And this is where Christiana is going to pop in here and there to ask us some questions and do some polling. So we're going to start with focus area 3, which I had mentioned before is the first priority. It connects here to the east to the existing Atlantic County Bikeway. Okay. So these are some different shots of, I'll be showing some aerials of all these locations. I'll be showing some on the ground photos to help everybody familiarize yourself with where we're talking about. So this top map is an aerial view of Mays Landing. And what you see in the red lines is the initial concepts that we have been looking at that came out of that initial feasibility phase and some additional sub-alternatives that we're already considering. So our purpose here is to minimize wetland impacts. We want to negotiate, how we safely get the trail in this US 40 area. So you'll see a sub-alternative here. We'll talk a little bit more on the next slide about that. And we also want to make sure that we connect to a new bridge that is being planned over the Great Egg Harbor River. That is a separate project that is being undertaken by the township. And so that is going to run alongside this old abandoned crossing, but it will provide a new crossing for bicycles and pedestrians over the Egg Harbor River. So we want to make sure that our trail ties into that on either end. So the general two alignments that we're looking at is the original one kind of came through the intersection of Route 40, and there's more photos in the coming slides, so hang tight. It runs along Route 40 until it connects to you see the little bit of blue piece here of the existing bikeway is. One of the sub-alternatives is going to be this along Atlantic Avenue. And on another slide, the next slide, I'll show you this one that goes through Underhill Park, which is kind of this little rectangle that pops up here. So this is a little bit easier schematic of what the three alignments that we're talking about. So we have, pink line was what we had originally been pursuing during the initial feasibility study. Then this sub-alternative 8.2 was a recent addition to run entirely along Atlantic Avenue from this intersection here at Main Street, just to make some of the crossing easier and to run along a lower volume roadway. And then there was an additional sub-alternative, alternative B, that turns up Farragut here and then jogs around Underhill Park before coming back to the Route 40 alignment to continue. You'll see here on each of these, we have some of these views. This is going to be view 1 on Farragut, and then we have view 2, which is the 3rd Street Bridge going over a little water feature or waterway here. There'll be view 3 that's behind Underhill Park, and then view 4, which is along Atlantic Avenue. So just so you can understand where those are, again, this is Farragut Avenue, view 1. View 2 is that 3rd Street Bridge alternative. And then view 3 is behind Underhill Park. These 3 views are all part of that alternative B. Atlantic Avenue is part of alternative A2. Christiana, we have a poll here.
Yes, we do. So before I get into that, there was a question that was put into the question and answer earlier on when we were initially responding to those polls. And the question, Debbie, is there plans to repurpose the train line that goes through Pleasantville?
So the abandoned rail line, or you're talking about further?
There's no specifics.
Okay. John, you might be better.
Yeah. I think since it references Pleasantville, that would be a different location. So I don't think that's referring to this corridor study area.
All right. So with that, just to Yes, thank you, John. And so just to bring our attention back to focus area number 3, after hearing about the alignment alternatives that Debbie just talked through, we want to understand from you all as to what should be the top priority for designing the proposed alignment. So we do have a poll, and let me pull that open. And for this poll, it is multiple choice, so you could choose more than one answer that you think applies to being a top priority for designing this proposed alignment. While we have folks respond to that, there was a question that came in through the Q&A. Is there a plan to connect Bikeway users to the county park at Lake Lenape for camping options? And that came from Joe L.
I'm not entirely sure where the location of the Lake Lenape campground is.
In Mays Landing.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is fairly close by.
Yeah.
So this alignment would be very close to there, and I think there could be a spur or some kind of offshoot from the main path to connect. That would be, I think, looked into a little bit later once the main alignment had been established.
All right, so it does look like the answers are kind of all coming in. I see some folks also using the question and answer, which is great. So let me end the poll, and we will share those results quickly.
Before
So
you start the second question, Christina, I think it'd be helpful if I go to the next slide and then come back because it gives a
perfect.
little bit more detail at the intersection.
Go ahead.
Okay, great. So just for full understanding of the different alignment choices, so this is the intersection of Summers Point Road, Main Street, which is Route 40. The original alignment, which was red before, and then various colors, would be this yellow line, and it would, cross Main Street here, require some geometric modifications of the intersection and widening of sidewalks. And then it would add this new kind of shared use path to get over the bridge here, and have some rapid flashing beacons to help people cross along this way. The other sub-alternative that was shown in that blue color on the other slide is also shown here. So this Summers Point Road eventually turns into Atlantic Avenue. So this was just kind of seen as possibly a simpler way to cross this intersection rather than contend with some of the heavier traffic that stays on Main Street or Route 40. Okay, thank you, Christina.
Of course. So with that, there are a couple of questions that have popped up in the Q&A, but before we get to those questions, just to take a look back at those results in regards to what you believe the top priority for designing this proposed alignment should be, it does look like around 53% of respondents indicated that access through trailheads and parking should be a top priority, followed by directness of the route, minimizing wetland and environmental impacts, as well as good lighting and pedestrian fixtures. So some good responses here. We also had a comment in the Q&A come up, priority to have least amount of conflict with traffic. I would assume, and that came from Julia Z. I would assume that means with vehicle traffic. We do have two other questions in here, Debbie. The first is, will any possible on-road alternatives be a separate protected bike lane? That came from Patrick M.
That'll be a design detail that's worked out later that depends on the width of the roadway and the right of way and the jurisdiction of any specific roadway.
All right, and then the last question that we have from Zachary V. Can a route go down Main Street and cross GEH River by the mill?
Go down Main Street and cross the Great Egg Harbor River by the mill. That's not the new crossing we were talking about to the west by the old abandoned train station.
No, yeah, I see where that is, Cotton Mill Bridge. That is not something that we looked at. I think it's a little bit less direct. And since the project's already underway to rebuild that bridge, there's a lot of momentum there. So I think we'd want to kind of build off of that, the old train trestle.
Understood. All right. So with that, we do have one last poll, and this question, so let me launch it now. It should be in front of you. So talking again about the actual alignments, this question now is asking which alignment alternative do you prefer? So after hearing what Debbie and John just spoke to, as well as the results from the last poll, now which alternative do you prefer? And here you can respond by choosing A1, A2, AB, alternative B, or no preference.
And I popped that map back up just to make it easier for folks.
It looks like some more responses are coming in, so continue to respond if you haven't done so already. All right, it looks like responses are quieting down. And so with that, let me end the poll quickly, share the results. And so it does look like majority of the respondents have identified alternative A2, so Gaskill Park to Atlantic Avenue as the preferred alignment, with alternative A1 and B kind of tied for second. But this is interesting, and this is good for the team to consider. All right, Debbie, I'll hand it back over to you.
Thank you. Okay. So again, this is a reminder about what focus area, where we are. And so a couple of final questions that I want to ask. And Christiana, maybe the best way for people to respond is to type in their answers. But the first one is we want to know are there any sensitive areas, either, wetlands, habitats, community concerns that we haven't identified along this portion of the alignment? And by this portion, we mean even all those sub-alternatives. This area 3, are there any sensitive areas that we haven't identified? The second question, thanks for popping that up, is where would you like to see entrance or access points into the trail in this area that's in the box, essentially, focus area 3? And is there anything else you want to tell us that we should consider about this focus area? Give you a few minutes to fill those answers in. Thank you.
And at this point, too, if you would like to raise your hand and actually respond out loud, you could do so. And you do that by clicking next to your name. There should be an option to raise your hand. Then we'll allow you to talk, and then you'll be able, again, to either respond or elaborate on a comment out loud. And we'll give everyone some time, as there are 3 questions and they are short answers. So take your time with this one, as your input is definitely very valuable. While everyone is responding, I do just want to note at the end of this presentation, we will be sharing both Jenna and Hannah's email addresses. So in the event that you weren't able to type in your responses quick enough, or maybe you thought of something later on that you want to share with us all, feel free to send your email with your thoughts, questions, comments to both Jenna and Hannah, and that will then be shared with the team for us to take a look at. I would also like to note too that this presentation will be posted to the SJTPO project site, their website, so you'll be able to review this material after this workshop concludes. All right, Debbie, I think we'll give it a few more minutes. We're at four respondees so far have gotten their responses in, so we'll give it a little more time, and then we can end this. And again, there's always an opportunity to provide your feedback later on. And it does look like we have some more responses coming in, which is great.
Great.
We'll give it another 30 seconds or so. All right. So with that, I will end the poll, but again, you can always send us an email with your responses later on if you do think of anything to provide us.
Thank you. Appreciate people's input. Okay, so we are next going to move to focus area 1, which is the west side, the connection to the future Camden County link. So focus area 1 here is the inset that you see, and the alignment runs through the Winslow Wildlife Management Area, which is a Green Acres encumbered property, so that requires some coordination with NJDEP. But our main purpose here is to avoid some steep slopes that kind of occur in this kind of wiggly section of the top of the path there, and minimize the wetland impacts. And need to coordinate here with Conrail, who owns this little bit of stretch where we'll be running alongside the railroad, as well as obviously NJDEP because of all the wetlands in the area. And then as we turn and go on to alongside, New Jersey 54, that'll require some coordination with NJDOT. As you can see, this cross section that we show, this is the NJ54 section. You have the highway, and then there's a good amount of separation because of that wide right of way that is owned by NJDOT. So we could have that path very well separated from the roadway. So just some photos of the area. This first view is, again, that path that would run alongside the Conrail tracks, which is an active track, maybe just 1 or 2 passings a day of a freight train. So not heavily used, but we do need to run alongside it. And then the view 2, is that showing that wide right of way that is along Route 54. So here we want to pop up the same 3 questions that we just asked for focus area 1. There's really no sub alternatives along this one, just some minor tweakings to, do some water crossings or to get around the railroad. So are there any sensitive areas, community concerns, or environmentally sensitive areas that we haven't identified along this portion of the alignment? Where would you like to see entrances or accesses to the trail in this portion? Again, the focus area 1 only is what we're talking about. And is there anything else we should consider about this particular focus area?
And again, if you'd like to respond out loud, feel free to raise your hand. And otherwise, we'll give everyone a couple of minutes to respond.
And a reminder again that there will be contact information on the last slide if you have thoughts that you think of after this meeting.
Give it about another 45 seconds. Let some folks respond. This is great. We appreciate your input. We see some more responses coming in. And again, we definitely thank you for your input and your feedback throughout just this overall workshop, as it will inform this next phase of the project. We'll give it another 10 seconds or so, and then I'll hand it back over to you, Debbie.
Great.
All right, I'm going to end the poll. And back to you.
Okay. No more questions have come in?
No additional questions at this point.
Great. Thank you. All right, so final portion is focus area 2, which you see in the Buena Vista Township area here. Let's dive into that one. So here, this continues down along NJ34. Again, up in this northern section of it, there is a lot of availability of right-of-way along 54. It does narrow down a little bit south of Malaga Road, And there may be some private parcels that would need to be acquired. So here we have two sub-alternatives that we are considering, and I'll talk about those on the next page, but we have called them Alternative A, which is the solid line, and Alternative B, which is the dashed line. So Alternative A, it runs south along 54 until First and Avenue, and then it travels along the south side of First and Avenue before continuing to those private parcels that are owned by the Buena Vista Campground. Alternative B is this dashed line that runs through this green here means this is a municipally owned parcel, so it runs through that first before continuing before Pancos Road, and then continues through some private properties along this farm road before connecting across First and Avenue with a new stream crossing here before again going into the Buena Vista Campground. Looks like you have another poll for us here, Christiana.
That is correct. So understanding and just learning about the two alignment alternatives that Debbie just talked through, we now want to understand from you all as to which alignment do you lean towards right now and why. So this is another short answer question. We are going to ask for a why are you leaning towards one or the other. So
I'm
here,
going to show some views first. I forgot to show this before you started answering your question, but so this view 1 is Route 54, that a little bit narrower southern section. View 2 is that Alternative B along the farm road, and then view 3 is showing First and Avenue. And then we have view 4 on the next page. That is the Buena Vista campground leading up to that trail entrance. And then view 5 is finally that abandoned rail corridor that we would be able to use. We'll go back to there. Thanks.
perfect. So again, alternative A is a solid line that's kind of towards the left-hand side of the image that you're seeing on your screen. And then alternative B is that dashed red line. Again, the question is, which alignment do you lean towards right now, just based off of the information that you just learned, and why? We'll give it again. We'll have some more time to respond. Give it another 30 seconds or so. All right, just a few more seconds. And then similar to what we had done in focus area 3, we had asked your opinion, your thoughts about the alignment. And then the next question is going to be, which do you actually prefer? So I'm going to end this poll now. And we'll move right into the next poll. And so similar to the question in the poll in focus area 3, ultimately, which alignment alternative would you prefer? Alternative A, which is that solid line on the map, B, which is the dotted, or no preference. All right, we'll give it another couple seconds. It looks like all the responses rolled in at once, which is great. See if anyone else would like to respond. All right, so let me end the poll and I'll share the results. And so as you can see here, alternative B, which again is that dotted line on the map, looks like 42% of those that responded indicated alternative B, kind of followed then by no preference, and alternative B coming in around 25% of respondents. All right, Debbie, back to you.
Thank you. Okay, so this last image is again our set of 3 questions for you. Are there any sensitive areas such as wetlands or community concerns that we haven't identified yet along, again, this focus area 2 that is outlined? Where would you like to see entrances or access points for the trail in this area? And is there anything else we should be considering about this particular focus area? Take a few minutes.
And I would like to say this is the last set of polling questions that we have for you all. So feel free to dump in all your thoughts and ideas now, since this is the last polling question that we will have for you. When we do get to Q&A, we could definitely open it up and have that conversation some more, but take your time and please respond. We'll give it another 30 seconds or so to see if anyone else would like to submit their responses. All right, a few more seconds. There are responses still coming in. All right, with that, I'm going to end the poll. And back to you, Debbie.
Thanks, Christiana. So now I want to run us through what the next steps are for us in the project. So we're complete our data collection just recently, this first phase. And now we want to move into updating our economic analysis. So that'll be kind of refreshing some of the demand data that we had used during the initial feasibility. So we're just going to refresh that. It has been 5 years. We're also going to work on what a security and maintenance plan could look like, and then take the input that we got from today, as well as going back out in the summer and having a pop-up events and getting some more input and really work on refining what that preferred alignment or sub-alignments are so that we can start to put together this off-road concept plan that we will then bring back in the fall to another public workshop so that everybody can see and comment on that. So right now we wanted to open it up to a question and answer period. I'll let Christina take the reins here on fielding questions and helping us sort that out.
So if you would like to ask a question, provide a comment on any of the information that you heard today, either raise your hand, you could then speak that out loud, or put it into the Q&A. We do have one question in there, and the question is from Joseph A. And the question is, has there been consideration for accommodations for food trucks, etc., at various trailheads to provide stops along the way?
At this point, that hasn't necessarily been a driver in our analysis. First, we want to locate where those trailheads would be, where they make sense and where there is demand for them. And then I believe that it would be dependent on what type of room there are, and then that municipality's specific, rules or ordinances related to things of that nature. John, if you have anything else to add,
Yeah, I will just add during the feasibility stage, the initial study, we did identify 11 potential locations for trailheads spread along the 22-mile alignment, with the goal of connecting, being nearby population centers, schools, other bike connections. So that was just our initial look at it. And that's on SJTPO's website, that feasibility study. And you can see there's a figure showing those locations. But now during this more advanced feasibility, we'd be looking for additional input on the best locations for trailheads. And then once those are identified, like Debbie said, we'd start to look into then you can get into the details of what's at each trailhead, whether it be parking or other amenities, and other types of connections back to the neighborhoods.
Thanks,
Sidewalk connections, bike connections, parking, food.
All right. It does look like we have one person with their hand raised. So Patrick, I am going to allow you to talk, and what that means, at that point, you're going to see your screen pop up. You're going to turn into a panelist for a hot second. You could then unmute yourself and ask your question.
Hey guys, thanks. First of all, I wanted to say this looks excellent and you have done a great job presenting it. So thank you all for that. My question and understanding it's, not strictly part of this presentation, but up in section of the square number one, to the middle of the screen to the left, I'm in Monroe Township, and I'm curious as the link trail where you're linking up to it in Camden County is so close to our Monroe Township bike path. Has there been any conversations with Gloucester County planner to possibly talk about that connection as well?
We have not had conversation with Gloucester in the first phase, right, John? Yeah.
No, not really. We coordinate with Camden County, given the
Yep.
link, but not with Gloucester. They may have been part of our steering committee, but I don't recall having any kind of direct conversations with them. I think that's a great point, though. It's something we can definitely look into.
Yeah, there are a couple trail projects happening in Gloucester County, and we've been involved with the link trail with Camden County as well. So I'm really hopeful we can look to that in the future as well. But this extension of the link trail into Atlantic County looks awesome. So thank you.
I'm sorry, Patrick, did that trail have a name? We want to look for it.
Yeah.
It's called the Monroe Township Bike Path,
Okay, thank you.
and it goes between Williamstown and Glassboro, 6.5 miles, but it
Okay.
really just ends in the middle of Williamstown and, on Bluebell Road. And so there would, definitely have to be some sort of, good thoughts to connect it to the link and to your trail as well.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Patrick.
Thank you.
All right. Does anyone else have any questions or comments? Again, feel free to use the Q&A, or you can raise your hand, and similar to Patrick, then you'll be able to ask your question or your comment aloud. And while you may be thinking of your question or your comment, just some additional questions just to think about, and maybe this will spark some thoughts that you would like to provide input on is what would make this bikeway, specifically this alignment, as you could see here in the red, feel successful to you in 5 to 10 years, especially if you use the bike trails today, or if you're interested in maybe starting to use them. What would make this feel successful? Or something else, I think one of the respondents, or maybe a few folks earlier on when we first started, indicated that they use the trails to get to landmarks or even for recreational uses with friends and family. Are there specific destinations such as schools, parks, campgrounds? And I know someone mentioned a campground earlier that you most want this trail to connect to. Is there something that is missing, maybe that this trail can help get you towards? On a bike or walking rather than using a car. So just some questions to think about, and if anything comes to mind, feel free again to put your comment or your question in the Q&A or raise your hand. And we'll give it a few more minutes. Again, as we said, the last slide that we have to share with you all is that contact information. If you do have any additional comments or questions following this meeting that you would like to share with us, feel free to send an email. And again, that will be sent all to this project team that you see here. All right. Well, nothing new has come in, Debbie, so I will hand it back to you. Oh, actually, we just got one.
Okay.
Perfect timing. So this is from Kevin H. Was there a feasibility study done to possibly utilize the whole unused track bed of the Conrail line from Winslow, WMA to Richland? Richland seems like the trail's already using part of that former double track alignment.
From Winslow to where? I'm sorry.
Richland?
John's looking on a
Yeah,
map
along
now.
Route 40. No, I know what this is a good question, and I know what he's getting at here. We did look at that during the feasibility study. So that would essentially cut the corner, and instead of going along 54 and then meeting up with the rail right away, it would cut kind of through Hamilton and meet up near Richmond. Part of the issue there, one of the trade-offs was that it the right of way and the ability to have enough room to run as a rails with trails and have enough space, and also the kind of isolated nature of it, that it would be a long segment along the rail right of way with no real connections to any population center or access points. So there were some concerns about it being very, very isolated and secluded. So that's why it did not make its way kind of formally into like as an alternative. But we did look into that during the feasibility study.
More demand by cutting through Buena Vista itself.
That was part of it too, right? Hitting Buena,
We
connecting
did,
with Buena.
sorry.
Hmm?
We did receive an additional question. I feel like it's mostly a comment. This is from Joe L. Roseanne and I are excited to have local opportunities to bicycle or walk off-road. We bicycle the Gap Trail and the C&O Trail, the Greenbrier River Trail. These become a draw to bring people to those areas. We'd like to see camping options to bring people to the area.
Yeah, that was part of the economic demand analysis that we had done in the first phase did talk about, tourism, increased opportunities for people coming into the area and what that could mean and how you would support that. Do you support that through things like more campgrounds or could it be supporting more viable restaurant businesses or things of that nature? So that was kind of considered as we did that economic analysis, and it'll be part of the updated economic analysis that we'll be doing in the coming months.
All right. Those are all the questions and comments that we had. Does anyone have any other questions, comments, thoughts?
Do we have any more thought-provoking questions, Christiana, that you would need to do?
We do have a couple more. So one of the ones that we did have here was, who do you think will benefit most from the Atlantic County Bikeway West project? So thinking about the user types, maybe locations of underserved populations. Are there any who ultimately will really benefit from this? Any thoughts in regards to that question? Um, Something else that we had was if you currently use the other bikeways or trails, generally speaking, what change would most increase your comfort level on those trails? Or something to be considered for new trails and bikeways. And some ideas of that would be define separation from traffic, as I think that was one of the questions earlier, or one of the comments, better crossings, lighting, regular maintenance. So things to consider in regards to the maybe some pedestrian amenities, we could call it, along the bikeway. And actually, one of the comments that did come in from Joe L. Was a question, restrooms along the way.
That's part of that trailhead analysis that John referenced earlier. Once we, dive a little bit deeper into this specific plan, we'll look at those initially selected trailheads and see um, what amenities could be offered at each of them. It's definitely under consideration, parking, restrooms, things of that nature.
And then we have Carl P. said the following should be considered as a stop: St. Augustine High School, Richland Town Square, and Funny Farm.
Yeah.
I'm familiar with Funny Farm.
Yeah, I'm not familiar. I was going to ask that too. Where is that located?
Carl, if you either want to raise your hand and you can answer out loud, or if you want to type it in the Q&A box again too, that'd be great.
Well, while he's doing that, I will say that our 11 trailheads did include one at St. Augustine, which
Mhm.
was kind of intended to cover that area near Richland too. So we definitely saw that as an important area to provide access to the trail, given what's, the activity in Richland and the school. Oh, okay. So right near there too, in this spot. And we actually we had a trailhead in Mitzvah Park too. Was one of the 11.
And for those that might not be able to see the Q&A, Carl had indicated, and Patrick also put it in there. Thank you both. It's in Mitzvah, I might be saying that incorrectly. I apologize. By the railroad, and Patrick provided the address, Railroad Boulevard and Mays Landing. And then we also see here a link. It is a rescue farm. So we'll definitely take a look into that. Thank you all. And we do have a question in here from Joseph A. Will there be emergency pull boxes or similar devices along the way?
There's going to be a security plan that is part of this. Particularly, I know that there are concerns about um, especially the long stretch on the abandoned railroad corridor along Route 40, parallel, I should say, to Route 40. We recognize that there needs to be, at certain intervals, safety features. So that'll be something that's part of that we look at as part of the security plan.
All right. Any other questions? Perfect. We have one here from Patrick M. Are you at the stage to consider signage, wayfinding, etc.?
Not currently. Um, that's a planned detail pretty far down the road. Is there a certain suggestion or a thought as to
I was just going to ask that too. Are you
information that are provided or locations? I'm curious what the intent is of that question.
all right, Patrick? I will allow you to talk. You just need to unmute yourself. There you go.
Yeah, thanks. I thought I could speak it instead of writing it out so much. Yeah, basically, it's been recognized on other trails. That, people are riding this trail. I'll use the one in Monroe because I live right next to it. People are going up and down the trail, often coming to one end or another to ride the trail, not local, but they have no idea that Wawa is a mile down the road. We have our nice brewery. You guys mentioned schools and parks, but with biking, it's always the wineries and the breweries are a popular destination. So signage like that, just that's useful for people to say, oh, I'm going to stop for lunch over here, whatever. You know, someone had mentioned the Gap and the C&O Trail, and I've ridden that as well. And those little towns really depend on the riders to come and support the local economy. So I want to suggest that we really, make an effort to point out those, accessible places along the trail, even if they're a little ways off.
Okay, thanks for that suggestion. So you're talking about signs on the trail that point to amenities off the trail. I didn't know if it
Yeah,
was the other way around. That's why I thank you for unmuting yourself
Yeah.
and explaining.
yeah, yeah. Thanks.
And I think to that, Patrick, while you're here, do you also find it valuable to what Debbie was saying of having kind of markers and signage within these corridors that are heavily trafficked and maybe by these amenities pointing to the trail? Is that something too that you would think it would be something that we should consider?
100%, yes. Because that's where I think the locals would be like, oh, I didn't realize we're so close to the trail and we could ride it to, Cape May potentially at some point
Mhm.
or Philadelphia. So, yeah, I think that's definitely would be needed and, appreciated by the, just, general population.
Thanks.
Right. Thank you, Patrick.
Yep.
All right. Does anyone else have any thoughts, ideas, questions, comments? Again, we're just looking for some input feedback on what you've learned today to help inform this next phase of the process. We have one comment from Joe L. Patrick, that's a good idea. Signage to find local eateries and shops, possibly kiosks along the bikeway. Thank you, Joe, for your comment.
Thank you.
All right, we could give it a few more minutes if anyone has any thoughts. Again, thinking about how will the bikeway, how would we make this bikeway feel successful from to you for 5, 10 years from now? Are there any specific destinations that we should consider connecting the trail to? I know we have already received some responses. If you're using any bikeways currently, what would increase your comfort levels? I know we've heard some responses into that, bathrooms, pull-off areas. and who would benefit from this trail? Again, thinking local residents, maybe without cars, families with kids, older adults, or even fitness users, recreational people that are interested in just getting out there and biking, walking. All right, Debbie, I think it's pretty quiet, so I will hand it over to you.
So I just want to thank everybody for their attendance tonight and their participation. I think that you guys had some really great ideas that we have noted as we move forward the project. If you think of anything else that comes to you after this meeting is complete, or if you've, see this, rewatch this recording and something else comes to you, or look at the original feasibility study and have some more thoughts, we have Jenna and Hannah's emails up here on the screen. Again, Jenna is from SJTPO, and Hannah is from Atlantic County. You can email them, and they will get any messages to us to take a look at as we're developing the off-road, off-trail concept plan.
I just want to note, Joe did have one last question
Yes.
that came in. Christina, do you want to?
Yep. And his question, this is from Joe L. And the question is, can this bikeway be connected to the New Jersey State Long Trail that is being built?
New Jersey State. Okay, we'll have to look at what that alignment is and where that
Yeah.
runs. I'm not sure where that is.
I'm not familiar with that either.
All right, so we could look into that. Thank you, Joe. We appreciate your questions and your comments throughout the evening. All right. So with that, we do want to thank you all for attending this workshop. Again, your input and your feedback throughout this workshop has been very valuable. We're going to go back, review it all. And as has been mentioned throughout this workshop, this recording, along with the presentation, will be posted onto the SJTPO project website. We did provide a link in the chat, so you could take a look at that website to learn more about the project. And again, if you do have any other questions or comments, feel free to send an email over to Jenna or Hannah. And of course, I'll be shared with the larger project team. So thank you again and enjoy the rest of your evening.